excited. For those that are first time joining, I'm Al. I'm the owner of Extreme FD, Deputy Chief here in the great city of Monroe, Wisconsin. This is our third episode, and tonight we're going to talk about consolidation, mergers, shared services, things of that nature. And I got some fantastic guests with me tonight to give us some insights on that. I'm hoping in the future that I can get a couple of chiefs that have actually been in this and through this to join us as well. Of course, those that I called are like, I'm in the middle of it politically. I don't think that's a good idea, and I totally get that. I respect those opinions and I appreciate it. But I'm gonna follow up on them, and I know many of them personally, so I'm gonna be asking them in the future to join us. But we're excited. Before we get rolling here, just real quick, couple exciting things going on. The website's been updated, so if you haven't been there, extremefd.com, please go there, check it out. We've completely revamped it. We're still adding a few things here and there, but it's got a whole new look. One of the things that we added, we'd like you to participate in, is when you go there to the homepage, again, extremefd.com, you'll get a pop-up and there's a survey. We're running surveys about every 7 to 10 days. And this, the current survey that just got put up tonight was discussing Wisconsin. I want to know what your thoughts are on Wisconsin's training. We being Wisconsin, not we being me, have added a number of non-certification classes. We've taken some of the motor pump operator classes, reduced the hours, cut them, some of them in more than half, reduce the hours by half or more. And that makes you, compliant with SPS 330, which is, as you know, the Bible for Wisconsin. My question to you is, have we dumbed down the fire service? And have we made a mistake in an attempt to appease the masses by lowering our standards? Have we actually endangered the people? So I want to hear what your thoughts are. So jump on there. Again, extremefd.com, take the survey, and we'll talk about that in a week. Two things. We got roll call is up and running. If you check it out on the website, the episode 1 and episode 2 are up. Episode 3, which is taking place tonight, will be up it'll be up by the end of the weekend. So those that missed it can go there and watch it. Just click on the roll call tab. There's also a tab called Morning After. That's a new segment that's going to be starting where I do a 5 to 10 minute segment on just kind of current events of the week, things like that. That'll be starting in a couple weeks, and that'll go out weekly. So got some good information happening, some fun things, and I'm really, really excited. So enough of that, enough of me. Let's talk about some of my guests tonight. I have Joe Hallstrom, Fire Chief for North Park Fire Department in North Park, Illinois, which is just on the northern edges of Rockford. And then I've got Scott with me. Scott, is it Yagi? Jaeger, sorry. Fire Chief down in Monroe Township, which is about 15 miles south of Rockford. Scott's with a volunteer department running about 150 calls a year. Joel's with a career department. A combination department, I believe, and they're running about 2,000 calls a year. So some difference of opinions, which is what I want to get and hear what's going on out there. So I'm going to start with you guys, let you guys roll. I'll try to do a better job of mediating this thing than that shit show we had last night with the debate, and try to keep it civil and try to give some good information to our listeners. For those that are listening, you know what to do. Go out to the comments, post in the comments. We'll do our best to monitor the questions and answer them if we can. So, Joel, let's start with you. Give me your thoughts. There's a lot going on. I kind of sent you both some information on kind of what's going on in Wisconsin here. What do you see happening with the shared services and mergers and all these different things of that sort? Give us your thoughts.
We're close enough to Wisconsin that we see this stuff happening on the south end. So the stuff that's happening that you've talked about with Beloit and Janesville, and then a little east of there, we have friends and acquaintances that are talking about it. So we've known it's been coming, and it's honestly it's I don't think it's just a Wisconsin thing. I think it's something that we're going to see really nationwide, and there's a number of reasons for it, and we can get into that too far, and I'm certainly not an expert on all this stuff. It's an opinion thing, right? So before I say anything, I want to preface that with me just talking my own game and the things we deal with. And so we've started this. So we have a very good relationship with Love's Park Fire, which is a city agency that's it's a big city. It's 20 some thousand people, big city compared to us anyway. And they've went from a very volunteer, I would dare say antiquated system of running to now they're staffed, and we've done really well working together in the aspect that operationally on fires and major incidents, we're one department. So that's our personal, I guess, involvement in that. And so just reaping the benefits of both of us having greater shared assets, that when my ambulance is tied up, there's an ambulance coming from there and vice versa. And, and we had a fire last night where within probably, I would say within 10 minutes, there were 3 ambulances, 2 quints and 2 engines on scene and 3 chiefs. So it's a good thing for all of us. And I think and Scott and I are friends. We'll put that out there in case people don't know who we are on here. And a lot of people probably are that way. We're both no ego people, right? You can't have egos in this business. And I think that's what destroys a lot of good agencies, is when you have an ego and you're afraid to look at what could be better by doing these things. We're not losing our identity. North Park is still North Park. But working with our neighbors so well, man, it's the product we put out for our consumers, right? Because they're consumers, they pay our taxes, they consume our services, is fantastic. And I've just rambled way too long, so I'll let somebody else talk.
No, that's great information, and it leads me kind of into a segue down to Scott. And Scott, you can certainly touch on anything you want. This isn't people that
like
watch.
Joel said, we're friends, and we talk a lot. We're probably on the phone 3-4 times a week, bouncing stuff off each other. Hey, I had this problem or that problem or whatever. And so we talk a lot. So we give each other a bunch of crap and everything like firemen do. But actually he's one of my best buds. So you're not going to offend either one of us. But I've got guys that, I'm a small department, 150 calls a year. Sometimes I can't staff my ambulance. I can't roll an engine fully staffed and everything. And the problem is I'm in a catch-22. My town is about 550, 560 people. So I don't have a lot of people to choose from. And then I got some people from outside of town, the suburbs of Chicago and stuff, that they want to come out and help. I don't get the call volume to keep them active. They want to run calls. They want to do which is understandable. So a lot of times I've got a couple that I actually send to Joel so they can go up and run shifts and they get some action.
That's a great point. Let me ask a little bit off subject. You guys one's Northern Rockford career department running 2,000 calls, and another one's a half hour south of there running 150 a year. Where'd the friendship come from? How'd you guys meet?
I think it was a class we took quite a few years ago. It was called Buddy the Boss in the Burbs, if I'm not mistaken. That's where we met. And
yeah, it was a Chase Sergeant class. Yep.
Yeah, it was. If you ever get a chance, it's a phenomenal class. But even the book is great. But we just kind of started talking, and we've been really good friends. And like I said, we talk probably 3-4 times a week.
That's amazing. How many times? I tell this to pretty much everybody I meet. They say, what's the most important thing I can do, Chief? I want to be a good firefighter, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, number one, you got to train. Okay. You got to put in the time. There really isn't any shortcut to that in this business. Number two, you got to network. You got to network because you go to classes and you meet people and you talk to them and you make lifelong friends and you get people that become confidants that you can call. And just like you said, you guys are talking multiple times a week running. You don't have to hide your dirty laundry because you know that you can talk to the other guy and he's not going to go post it on Facebook and he's going to give you a straight answer. And that's what we need, right? We need help and we need honest answers. And so that's fantastic.
And that's exactly what it is. It's,
Joel, you made
might
a
not like
comment.
what we say, but you're going to hear it. and there's no holes. We're not mad at each other because we're telling you the truth, so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm 100% behind that. Joel, I want to ask you a question. You hit a key component. You and Loves Park are working together and things sound like they're going very well. And you made the comment that we didn't lose our identity. We're still North Park. And I think that is, I mean, the egos, we can talk about egos, but I don't think we have to. But identity, a sense of belonging, a sense of community, those are all really, really important factors for I think any firefighter, but definitely for volunteers. And I think that that's a real fear of losing that kind of, prevents that. How did you overcome that when you guys, we all know firemen talk, right? So word had to kind of leak out that you were going to start doing some things together. How did you go about making that transition work?
And one of the things, just so people who don't know who we are, North Park we're a combination department by the book term, because the combination is we pay some part-time staffing during the day, but about like nights and weekends, it's basically volunteer. There's a small reimbursement, but it's not enough. And so then our ambulance is a contract so those guys are paid to be there, but we've done really well from the perspective of, and we'll get into this later, but the Loves Park relationship, a new mayor was elected essentially. They conducted a public safety study through a very respected local retired. So Rockford's our big metropolitan area. So the Rockford Fire Department, a retiree from there, did a study for them, identified some improvements that could be made. And so Loves Park worked very hard, very quickly over the course of a year to really do an about face and to change considerably operationally every model of what they did. So they didn't provide EMS, they do now. They didn't have full-time staffing, they do now. So it was kind of nice for us, because when that change was being made, we were in at the ground floor, and by no means is North Park perfect. We're very underfunded, so we struggle with some aspects of how we do things. But we have a very dedicated set of young people that are really interested in being career. So we do really well with aggressive young people that move on to career agencies. And so that's how we positioned ourselves to have people. But so it was a good time to do that, because as they were, I wouldn't say struggling, but as they were making that change, there was lots of opportunities for us to run with them as they were making that conversion. And so our guys we doubled our fire load, right? We doubled our volume for a lot of the calls we ran. And that's fantastic. That's another attraction. When you talk about consolidation, and we're not consolidating, it'll be long after I'm gone that if we're ever one department, totally operationally. But from a shared resource standpoint, why do most of these guys join that are young? They join because they want to do it. They want the excitement of it. And they want the experience so they can, maybe use that towards a career aspiration. And we see way more fire now because we're working together, and they're seeing the fire quicker because it's an automatic aid thing and not a mutual aid thing where, by the time we get there, the fire's out or stuff like that. So I think ego-wise and from a perspective of everybody getting along, it's been kind of a natural thing, and I'm not going to take credit for it. I don't think any of the administration on both sides is responsible. I think it's been a cultural thing. We've had days where both crews have cooked out together and they'll play like grudge match basketball. I think they did some sort of frisbee competition. I'm not sure what it was, but that's the stuff, right? Because that's how they're bonding and becoming. They may not be the same crew, but they are essentially, because we have shift assignments on the volunteer side too, the duty crews. It's fantastic, and the relationship can only get better. And we've done a very good job of anybody who decides to maybe cause a little bit of an issue on a scene, we nip it in the bud and identify that issue and take care of it. And it's gone remarkably well. And I couldn't be happier with the outcome. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Because that's a huge deal. I talked to a fire chief earlier this week that his department and another department were discussing and looking into a merger, an actual consolidation, which is just scares the bejesus out of everybody, because that's where the identity thing comes, and they discussed the costs. The cost of the changes would actually, the firefighters, to an extent, they definitely played a part because there was a lot on both sides that were against it. But in the end, the cost of somebody had to come up with new name. Somebody was going to have to re-letter the trucks. Somebody was going to have to re-letter the station, and uniforms and patches and T-shirts. And they started looking at it, and I think if I remember right, he told me it was going to be somewhere around $400,000 or $500,000 before they was all said and done to rebrand everything, if you want to call it that. That's my word, not his. And he said that combined with not a majority, but a very vocal minority on both sides of the aisle, kind of put it to a quash. I talked to a different chief this week. It was actually last night. There was 3 departments, and I was asked not to name names for obvious reasons, so I'm not, but 3 departments looking at doing some auto aid and things of that nature, and possibly consolidating not from changing a name and actually legally merging, but consolidating from a financial aspect. And I don't know the law in Illinois, but in Wisconsin, we have fire districts, but they're not true fire districts. In Wisconsin, you're not allowed. A fire district is not a taxing entity. So the municipality has to tax, and then they all have to put whatever dollar amount out of their general operating money into their fire district pot. And with this particular group, it was they couldn't agree to who should pay what into the pot, and that they tried for according to him 3 years they spent trying to come to an agreement. And at the end of the day, they just couldn't do it because everybody always felt they were paying too much. Imagine that. So they didn't. So they continue to this day to operate like they did. So I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, egos is certainly part of it. I think kingdoms. People talk about kingdoms. They don't want to lose their kingdom. But my experience has been that's actually been the smaller part of it. The bigger part has been the government entities figuring out who should pay what, so it's fair to their tax base, and then the feeling, dealing with the soft things like the feeling of a loss and the identity. I mean, we've seen up here. I think I was talking to Scott about this on the phone. School districts, small rural school districts have been dealing with this 15 plus years probably. Where they run out of students, they're shrinking the tax base, and they got to figure out a way to do it, and they have to a lot of time merge. We have a lot of them co-op for sports, and stuff. So we see that. I hate to use the word easy, but I can see with Loves Park and North Park how it would be, maybe better word is easier, to share services and do auto aid and even perhaps share personnel at some point if it ever goes that direction. It's, I think, a little bit more difficult when you get to the rural area, and you've got 6, 7, 10, 12 miles in between communities. What are your thoughts on that, Scott? You're in a more rural area.
Well, it is a lot harder. And do what?
Do you think that it would be more challenging for somebody in a more rural area than say?
Well, it is, because we get a lot of mutual aid from ambulances and stuff from our neighbors and stuff. And the problem is we can't give it back a lot of times because we're hurting so bad. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it's like we talked before, I take it pretty personal, but I've been doing this for a lot of years and been chief over there for 15, 16 years now. And I take it pretty personal, but then you turn around and you look at even the Lions Club, they're having problems. It's volunteerism is just not what it used to be. So, I mean, I feel bad because I can't, I can usually run an engine, but if somebody has a bad accident or something, sometimes I can't get my ambulance here, so.
Yeah. And it's tough, because if you've got two small departments that are struggling with personnel, with staffing is probably the best way to put it. We're struggling with staffing. It really doesn't matter if you have AutoAid or not. If you've got a 7, I'll just say 5. If you got 5 miles or more that you got to travel, you know as well as I do, if the house is burning, it's going in the ground.
Pretty much.
That's just.
I mean, it's just the way it is. It's the honest truth.
You can't overcome time and distance.
Nope. I build my Mavis cards, so they're built pretty heavy. AutoAid, and if I tell my guys, if you think it's anything, go to the second alarm, go to the third alarm, do what you got to do. I just don't go heavy and have guys sitting there because it takes a while for the rural guys to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I think, I'll go out on a limb here, and I think what's going to happen with these smaller communities is that, I think they're going to end up contracting with larger communities, and they're going to have a staff station just a satellite station is what it's probably going to be to get that first engine. And that engine will probably, they may, I don't know if they'll do transport, but they may have, that first response engine where they're running a 3-man crew, and that's their initial fire attack, and that's their initial medical emergency response as well.
I know we've got a town close to us that's what they do. There's 4 stations around them that is a fire district, and then there's one of the bigger towns that is in the center. They supply an engine for the one that's in the center, and then they run that engine wherever there's a fire out in the smaller communities.
Yeah. What are you seeing in Illinois from a funding standpoint? Are you maxed on what you can increase? Do you have to ask for more? How does that work in Illinois?
From our perspective, if you're a fire protection district, there's a max tax allowed. So on the fire side, there's a max tax. We're maxed out on that. You can do a rescue tax, which is another small fraction, which we've tried and failed. And then if you run an ambulance, you can also do an ambulance taxing district. And that's our big rub for us right now is we have an interesting community in that our fire protection district is called North Park because back, years ago in the 40s, this area was called North Park, but it's the village of McChesney Park, which is incorporated in the 80s, which we cover a portion of that. We cover rural areas that are still within the contiguous boundaries of the city of Rockford. And one of our big things is we don't have a community base identifies with us as, maybe you have, as an example, like Cherry Valley just passed a referendum successfully, and the residents of that community identify as Cherry Valley, right? So they did well. I think they did a great job when they passed this referendum. I think there's a community identification problem for us that it's hard for us to get tax increases. Our area historically, they live here because they don't want to pay a lot of taxes. The village itself doesn't levy a property tax, so that's a huge reason why people live here. So we're fighting that not enough money to do what we should be getting, because 2,000 calls a year is not hugely busy, but it's also not slow. And for what we operated on, for tax money, we're under $800,000 a year, and you figure in you got to pay some people to be here during the day, and you're trying to keep your buildings up and everything else. That's not a lot of money, and it becomes tough. And so our wonderful state has raised the minimum wage consistently, and they're continuing to do so because that's what they think is right. But they do these things without understanding the implications for small agencies like ours, where we're tax capped. We can't go any higher. There's limits on it. And that worries me a great deal. And that's why I think the annexation thing is going to get, not annexation, consolidation thing is going to get pushed much heavier in Illinois, because we're going to get to a point where the rise in property values is not going to provide enough increased tax revenue to cover the rise in unfunded mandates by our state. And it's going to get ugly for a lot of people. I mean, not for us necessarily right away. I think there's lots of agencies, even in our small region, that are much, much smaller budgets that are going to struggle a great deal. And I think that's when you're going to see the dominoes fall, where this consolidation is going to really take effect. And Scott's in a different county. I don't know if they have the same tax cap stuff that we have, but it's certainly not a good thing for us.
Well, and that's the thing. We can only go up so high, and we're about 190,000. But see, now we've got two sides. I've got an ambulance side and a fire side. So where he's only 800,000 for one side. So if he was to get an ambulance referendum, he'd be 1.6 basically.
Gotcha. Yeah, Wisconsin went through a lot of changes over the last 10 years on tax wise, and I won't pretend to know all the tax codes, but I know that there are limits, and it has to do with your growth, your community's growth, and there's like a base, a max that you can raise, and then you can go over that max a certain amount. There's a formula if you have a tax-based growth within your community. And in Monroe, one of the struggles is we ain't growing. In fact, some could make an argument that we're actually shrinking. So our increases are very, very small. Fortunately, we're very, very efficient. So we've been able to find ways to get things done without sacrificing safety and stuff like that. Things like putting off new equipment, or maybe refurbishing a truck instead of buying a new one. Things of that nature have kind of helped us along over the last 5 years. But what I'm seeing in the rural areas, where there just isn't that wiggle room, is you've got townships that have not raised taxes for many, many years. Not even that 1.5% or 2% that the state allows them to every year, haven't even taken that amount, or have only taken a portion of it. And what has happened is they fell behind. So they should have been taking a couple percent every year, year after year after year, and building up and keeping up. And now they're starting to see expenses, because whether it be staffing costs or equipment costs, or whatever part of the game you want to apply it to, they're seeing these costs that maybe they didn't see before because they had a lot of people, or maybe their equipment was new at the time or whatever, but they kind of kicked the can down the road, so to speak. And now they can't get the money because they're limited on how much they can go up unless they go to referendum. And right now, referendums just are not doing well. They don't have a good track record, at least in southern Wisconsin. And it's not just with the fire service that we see this. We see this with school funding. But another area that we see it a lot is for whatever reason, a lot of communities in the area have had to do recent upgrades to their water, their public water supply, maybe a well house or a water tower or something like that. And they have to go to the state and ask permission to raise this huge amount of money, because they haven't raised, in some cases, they haven't raised the water rates in 25 years. Well, now some people are seeing this huge spike in their rates, and they're like, holy cow, I would have rather given you $10 a year more for the last 25 years than all of a sudden be looking at a $300 addition to my taxes, So it's a double-edged sword, I feel for the politicians. To some extent, they created their own problem, but to another extent, what do they run on? Nobody gets elected saying I'm going to raise your taxes. So So that's a challenge. Scott, we talked on the phone. You've got living quarters down there that you said some of the locals use.
Yeah, I built.
You have pretty good luck. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I built 4 bedrooms in there. Hopefully, for some of the people out of the suburbs and stuff to come out and spend the nights and stuff like that. And that didn't work out so well because a lot of them haven't. They're not getting calls, so they don't want to come back and spend their time. Which we have a day room, we have a pool table, we got TV, we've got everything. But actually, it's worked out very well because I've got a couple of the locals that have been out of the department for a lot of years. They just like to stay down there, so they'll grab a cot and actually a bed, and they'll just stay down there. So it's worked out very well for us. It didn't work the way I wanted it, but it worked okay for. It wasn't a waste of money.
Sure. So you got to make it inviting. I think is the point there is whether it's people coming from the outside or the locals coming down to hang out. You have to have an inviting space that is comfortable and enjoyable to be around, and then people will likely hang out and be available, right?
Exactly. Like I said, we've got a pool table, we've got recliners, TV, popcorn popper, whatever they want, So.
Joe, are you in Loves Park doing anything from a training aspect? Do you guys do much training together so your operations are similar?
We've started that. We do, again, to kind of keep our own identity. And so one of the weird things, I guess, about us working so well is there's a lot of things that are very different. So our EMS systems, we're in 2 different systems. So our resource hospitals are different. So our EMS training is separate. Our contract staffing, even for both sides, are different companies. So there's a lot of differences, but we dedicate one night a month for like a joint training between the 2 agencies. And it's worked out pretty well so far. I think it lets the folks get more comfortable with each other and how their apparatus will work on something. And one of the big ones right now is we're working on we don't really have high rise. Well, they have a high rise in their city, and we have some low rises that would have standpipes. So we're really working on getting on the same page that if there's an incident in any one of these facilities, that we're all kind of doing the same things. So there's no big confusion, because that's, like we always read about this, right? That's one of those high risk, low frequency things. So we need to be on our game about that. So that's one of the things we're working on. Loves Park has a fantastic training officer that both of us have known a long time. So I'm really excited that we can utilize his talents to help us with some of that stuff. And it's working well. And obviously I know there's going to be speed bumps and hiccups along the way, but for coming into this, and it's only been really a couple of years of us working as closely as we are, it's been pretty spectacular. And it's kind of flattering when some other agencies like south of Rockford have kind of looked and said, oh geez, those guys are doing a great job, let's do it this way. And so there's some departments south that are kind of trying to combine how they operate and do some things too. So, and again, I think it really comes down to, I'm pretty easygoing and mellow about stuff and try to get along with everybody. And the chief that's running Loves Park is easy to work with and open to these ideas. And that's really what it boils down to, because typically if we don't have opposition to it, what reason do our folks have to oppose it? And I'm optimistic about everything that happens. And we joke about it, because if you're not familiar with our districts, so we're a fire district, Loves Park is a city. Loves Park has grown, kind of put like fingers of territory into the rural areas that were our fire district back in the 40s and 50s. And then the village of McChesney Park was incorporated in the 80s to kind of stop that northern growth. So there are lots of areas where I will be first in on their fires, because we're closer. There are lots of areas they'll beat us. And so from a perspective of that, we're never going to beat each other, everybody's fires, but there's a little competition there, and we're not going to rub it in. But it's gone really well.
Not on the record anyway, right?
Well, I mean, we're not going to do, you hear the East Coast stuff that happens and where there's fist fights and clamping hose line. None of that nonsense happens, but there are areas that they're working on putting a satellite station kind of into service with a jump company. And once that comes up, there's going to be a big part of their area they'll beat us to. So it's all phasing, right? It's all getting those baby steps to where you need to go. And COVID certainly put a stop to a lot of their stuff, because the city of Loves Park, again, is another agency or another municipality that's an odd one, because they don't assess a property tax. So they're literally live off of sales tax, and they live off like franchise fees and those things. So the halting of sales tax put a big hit on their operations as a city, and with rightly so, right? And so we're kind of lucky because we're cruising along on the property tax thing that might take a hit if property values decline in the next couple of years, but we're not seeing that fast hit that municipalities were. So, but they've survived it well, and it's a fantastic asset. And the best compliment obviously is we have some retirees that they stay in touch with the district, and to hear them say, well, this is the way it should have been 30 years ago, it's fantastic. That's a pretty good compliment, and that's they notice it, and I'm hoping other people do too, that it's a good thing for all of us.
Yeah. You got anything, Scott, you want to add about training, about just working with your neighbor and collaborating? And
Well, we try, but the problem is half of us are on different training nights. And actually, one of the neighbors is in a different county that borders us. I was talking to him the other day, and I think we're going to change our nights to their nights, probably shortly after the first of the year, to start training with them more, because it just becomes a hassle when you're on different nights. We don't train during the day so much. We train at night, and trying to, get together with everybody is not always convenient.
oh, no, I mean, I totally get it, and this is part of what I'm talking about, is I think people, especially people that aren't in the fire service, okay? So business people, government leaders, anybody really that's involved that may be pro-merger, pro-consolidation, pro-shared services, put whatever label on it you want. But if you haven't been in the fire service, there are so many moving parts, and trying to, just like you said, we don't train, you can have 4 departments, right? And 4 departments training on 4 different nights. I'll use Monroe for an example. We train every Tuesday, but our full training, our full department-wide training is twice a month, second and the fourth Tuesday. Well, our neighbors, they may train on Wednesday, and then the neighbor to the other direction may train on Mondays, So you want to try to do things, and then you're like, well, who's going to give? And there really has to be, I think there has to be a strong desire to get things done. I think it needs to start at the top, and I think it needs to start with baby steps, and in most of those items, really, Joel, you hit on. Your relationship with Loves Park seems like it. I'll just use it in relationships. You're dating. You didn't have 2 communities say, boom, we're merging. We're going to come up with a new. It's going to be North Love whatever. I mean, instead of just going full bore and saying we're merging and consolidating everything, which unfortunately a lot of these reports come out and say should be done, you're saying, hey, let's start with just a couple little things here. You got automatic aid, you're going to be doing some training stuff. Let's start with just some baby steps, get to know each other a little bit, and then we can advance. And I think
who knows what the future is. So I don't know what will ever come of that if we ever do. I mean, that's not even been a discussion at this point of a consolidation of that nature. But I think we'd be ignorant not to look at what tomorrow might bring, right? And so there's a lot of that. And speaking of the training night thing, we changed our training nights. So we were typically a Monday night training, and I still struggle with this, and it's been months where I'm afraid to do anything on a Monday night because in my head somehow, because of 20 years of doing this that Monday nights are tied up, right? And so, but we made the leap, not necessarily just to try to bend over to anybody else, but it really made sense because we have other auto aid partners. We have a pretty robust auto aid system in our county, and so a lot of agencies really rely on it for, if you want to meet ISO requirements, you're supposed to have so much stuff on scene in a certain amount of time. And so another auto aid agency just north of us also trains on Tuesdays. And so the long-term plan is to get with them because that helps ISO points a great deal. And that's one of our jobs, right, is to try to get the best value for the buck for our customers. And if we could lower our ISO rating, that will reduce, depending on the insurance company, obviously, it might reduce their rates. So, we did it. I think there was a little bit of pushback, but overall it's gone fairly well to make it work.
Yeah, I know that's awesome. And I wasn't trying to put any words in your mouth, Chief, that it was going any further, but I think the point I was trying to make was, how do you eat an elephant? Small bite, one bite at a time, right? And I think based on what I'm hearing, I think please correct me if I'm wrong, but if you guys didn't do anything different, didn't add one thing, didn't change one thing, just stayed where you're at right now, I think it would be safe to say that everybody on both sides have benefited.
This is a fantastic.
The department is better. The citizens are better served. Resources are being better utilized without doing another thing.
Absolutely. And our northern neighbor, none of this is secret stuff. Our northern neighbor is Harlem Roscoe, and we have an auto aid agreement with them where they're coming from their station, which is maybe a mile from the northern edge of our district. And there are times when, depending on the day and what we've got going on, they might beat us into something if it's a fire. And I really, some people would really they'd be bothered by that, but I don't really care. I'm very confident in the people that are showing up from there to help us. They've got great people. And honestly, when somebody's house is on fire, they don't give one shit about what the side of the truck says. They don't. As long as it's red and shiny or yellow and shiny and it's got water coming out of it, they're happy. And so I could genuinely care less about the ego part of it. We've got areas south that another agency could help us get to quicker. And if they beat us, so be it too, because it's the ultimate doing what we're supposed to do. And that's mitigate hazard and protect property and all that other stuff. And if you because some agency beats you in, and that's the reason why you don't have an auto aid agreement, you're ignorant. You need to walk away from the business because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. So
yeah. I think the ego thing, that's in every business. I don't think it's special to us.
Yeah.
But I think the training, when you train together, when you work and play together and you have a relationship, the ego thing kind of goes to the side.
I think so. And we can hang our hats on other successes, right? So, we've done really, really well as a department with getting people into career jobs. And there's a ton of them that have gotten hired into Rockford. And we have a disproportionate percentage of that who have done that. And so maybe we brag about that. Maybe that's our way to brag and say, hey, come to the farm league or the feeder team for a big department. And maybe that's the way to get people attracted to be here, and it's not because of what I think. It's a cultural thing. I think they feed off each other, and when they work to be better, to get where they need to be, they help each other out. It's not me doing something to get them there. Somehow you got to find a way to bring your culture to a place that works, and then embrace it and sell it. And that's what we've been doing, is come to North Park because, hey, look at these last 3 guys that went to Rockford, and look at the 20 or so that have gone to career in the last 5 years. That's something to be said for that. Maybe we're offering something from a networking perspective internally that gets these guys where they want to be.
Right. Yeah.
So,
no, I think that's good stuff, and I think that we've been a farm team in Monroe here for many years for a number of surrounding career departments, and we market off that all the time. if you want to go to the career side of things, I certainly can't guarantee you a job. It's so competitive, but I can help you, and I will help you reach your goal if that's what it is. And if I'm going to only have you for 3 or 4 years, you know what? If you go career in 3 to 4 years, you probably gave me a lot of effort in that 3 to 4 years. So we both win, right?
Well, and that's one of my last guys I gave to Joel. He come to me and he says, I think I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm like, that's fine. And he lives in my district, and I like, can we talk? And he told me that he goes, I want more action. I'm like, okay, can I get you more action? And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, I've handed a couple guys to Joel so far, and I'll give him this one. And so the guy lives in my district. He's still on my department, but he's going up. He's getting extra training from Joel. He's making, they want experience. What do? They want experience. They got to make calls. And so he's making calls with Joel, and it's working out very well for both of us. I still keep him. Joel gets a guy that wants to run shifts, so it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's nice. Getting close to our hour, so I want to start wrapping up. Would like to ask each to just answer a final question. Right now, today, what do you need to solve or try to solve? What is your most pressing issue for you and your department over the next, we'll just say 12 to 18 months?
Staffing.
Go ahead, Scott.
Staffing and money. I mean, we're not destitute because we really don't pay a lot, but you could always use more money. If we had more money, we could probably pay our people better. I mean, we pay per call. We can't afford to pay per hour, but we pay per call. And it's a staffing, but then, like I said, it's a catch-22 because the staffing, they want to run calls. Why are they there? To run calls. We don't have a lot of calls, so we're in a bad area right there.
Do you have the interest? Do you see a fair amount of interest and then it wanes, or
Yeah, we've got
some people are like, I don't even have nobody to recruit. I have nobody. We're an old community.
I would say probably 50 to 60% of my community is retired.
Wow.
We're heartened because they've lived there so long that they gotta, and this is a bad thing to say, but they gotta die for a younger couple to buy their house with kids. And the problem is, then the kids, they have kids and they're into soccer and this and that, so the parents don't have time to come down and do whatever. So it's just kind of a bad deal for us. I mean, Joel, he's lucky enough to where he could choose from people. He's got people coming from other areas. They get the calls. We don't.
How do you deal with that? Joel, how do your people balance that? Are they, when they respond, do they take shifts? They're not responding based on pagers or anything like that up there, are they?
So it's kind of a two-tier system. So there are a number of people who are still very local, and if it's a significant event, then they'll come from home and back up other stuff. They'll come and grab rigs. But I've probably got over half the roster that lives far enough away that they're doing volunteer duty shifts in the buildings. So we have living quarters. They can do all the things they need to do. There's a certain hour expectation per month, which is not overwhelming. In my opinion, I think we've done okay with it. And
can I ask you what that is?
So the absolute minimum we require is 36 hours in a month, and the recommended is 48. So it's not, especially if they're sleeping in at the station. We're not so busy that you're up every night. It depends on the day, and there are nights where they sleep all night. There are nights where they're up all night and they're mad the next morning. So I get it, but I think we're kind of in that nice position where if you come and do hours here, you're going to do some stuff. maybe you're going to see some significant medical calls. Maybe you're going to see a fire here and there and a wreck, but you're pretty much guaranteed that for the hours you put in, you're going to get something out of it. And that's where I think, Scott struggles because their call volume is so much less. But if I were to rely again on just community members to be on the department, we would be in a world of hurt. We would be in significant trouble because it's the same thing. We have an aging demographic for a big part of our community, which isn't help. And we all know that society as a whole is busier than it's ever been. So we just don't, the numbers to volunteer are not what they used to be. And then the demands to be a firefighter are significantly worse. You touched on that earlier on, and I don't know Wisconsin's requirements, but in Illinois, there's a lot of hours that go into being that basic new guy that, to get that first certification. And it's a tough go unless you have career aspirations. It's a lot of demands for somebody that just wants to help their neighbors, right? So it's tough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Wisconsin's it's a hodgepodge. Most of the departments that I'm familiar with, which is, I'm not going to say it doesn't equal most of the departments in the state, just most that I'm familiar with, have higher requirements than what the state does. The state requirements are pretty minimal, but you're right. Even at the minimal level, if you're doing it to just help your neighbor, it's still a lot to ask.
Yeah.
And it's, the whole call volume thing is, the old saying, careful what you ask for. The guys that don't have many calls ask for more calls. And the problem is, if you don't have any money to compensate your staff, you can hit a point where you have so many calls, you burn your people out, and they can't give. So, you go from one evil to the other. I talk to people all the time, like, oh, I wish I had money to pay people like Monroe does. And I'm like, there are things there are benefits to being able to do that. And that certainly helps with recruitment. But don't think for a minute that there's not some downside to that. When you start to really walk that fine line between, are they a volunteer or are they an employee, and discipline issues and expectations and all those different things that come with compensation, it gets tough. I mean, that's a conversation we can have on another day. I'd be glad to, but money is definitely not a solve all. I think anytime that you're dealing with extrinsic motivators, they're usually short-lived. If the true volunteers that do it truly because they love the job are to me the easiest to deal with, but the most difficult to find.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
Help make a house payment at the end of the month. That's what I went to my board and I said, hey, can we start paying a little more? And they're like, well, money doesn't solve the problems. I said, no, but it takes care of the people that are taking care of us.
Yeah.
Because you got spouses, whether it's male, female, whatever it is, you've got spouses there. And if their spouse is gone a lot and they bring home a paycheck once a quarter or whatever, then they're a little less lenient to be grouchy because, you're just going down there and playing with the boys or playing with the girls or whatever, And but if they bring a paycheck home, and it doesn't have to be huge, but if it maybe, $500 a quarter or whatever it is, hey, that's groceries for a month.
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing with money is I think it has to be two things. Well, any reward, any extrinsic reward really has to be big enough or important enough to make a difference. So like you said, $500 a quarter is a pretty good sum of money. I mean, that's real money. And then it has to be frequent enough that I know it's coming or I can expect it. If you were to say, I'm going to give you $1,000 at the end of the year at our December meeting, I would be appreciative of that $1,000 until about early February. And then I'd be starting to get burned out again and tired of the crap and blah, blah, blah. But if I got to hit these participation levels and I'm going to get that $500 check every quarter, if I do that, 3 months goes by pretty fast. And $500, oh geez, Christmas time. I'm going to get that check in October. Now I got some money for Christmas presents, or I'm going to get that check in January and I can pay for those Christmas presents. So
some of our guys have said their wives are a little more lenient now or whatever, because they're bringing home a few bucks. They're not getting rich by no means, and that's, at least it helps. It's become a part-time job. It's no longer, when I first started back years ago, I always told everybody, if you could hold a hose and drink a beer, you were on the department. If you didn't spill your beer, you were chief, and that's a lot of truth to that. But now it's with the state requirements and this and that, it's a part-time job. Yeah. So if they can bring home some money.
Yeah, and that's, what I think, that's part of the battle of what's going on is we still have, I call them clubs, fire clubs, and then we have fire departments. And I was part of those clubs for many, many years, and they were great, but expectations have changed. And with certifications and training requirements and just the community and the citizens of what they expect out of our firefighters, it's a lot to ask. It is a lot to ask, people, it's not the 1980s, or it's not even the 1990s anymore. I mean, things have changed.
Well, I've had it where people are like, what took you so long? I'm like, I was home in bed. And they're like, what do you mean you're home in bed? Because they moved out from the burbs or whatever. And they're like, you were home? I'm like, yeah, I don't get, this ain't my full-time job.
Yeah.
And then they're kind of a little more lenient, but at first they get really cranky because it took us a while to get there. But I got to get up. Got to get my clothes on, got to go down, grab the truck, and away we go. And people from the burbs think, okay, they move out here because they want lower taxes. Well, with lower taxes, you get less services.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, guys, I appreciate your time and for coming on. You got any final comments? Joel, I'll start with you. If you got any final comments you want to make, feel free.
No, I think the big thing is, and I don't live in everybody else's worlds, but I think the fear to embrace, I'm not going to say consolidation, but just working together and trying to share resources and that kind of stuff, it's a bad, don't be afraid of it. I think it's worked really well for just about everybody who's done it. I know there's obstacles to a lot of people to do it, and I know consolidation, if it ever happens in Illinois, there's a lot of obstacles that we didn't even touch on tonight that I know there's places in the suburbs that they're talking about, especially with pensions and everything else, that it becomes a nightmare because that's hard to do, but it's coming. And I think either you're at the front of it or you're at the back of it. And if you can be at the front of it, you're gonna have a better time with it. No doubt about it. So don't be afraid of it.
Scott?
I just think we're all in this together, and if we can help each other out and try and, figure it out. I always say that firemen are the biggest thieves there are because we're stealing ideas from each other all the time.
Absolutely.
We're all in this together.
Yes, and I share that 110%. That's why I started Roll Call. It was to create a round table, a forum, a relaxed area to just kick ideas and opinions out there. And when I was asked after the first episode, one of the followers reached out to me and asked me what my goal was or what I was hoping to do, and I says, if one firefighter finds one idea, one point, one topic, one training idea, whatever it may be, that helps their department, it's a success, because that's really all I'm trying to do is help, get people to share ideas. And I don't know them all, so I'm reaching out. And 7-8 days ago, I didn't know either one of you two, and now I've added 2 new friends to my network and a whole lot of information to my listeners, and I'm thankful that both of you came on. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your stories and your opinions, and I hope to continue to know you and talk to you for many, many years in the future. So
absolutely.
Hang tight with me. For the rest of you out there, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining Roll Call. We'll have another episode the end of October. Make sure you go out there, extremefd.com, and take the poll. Check the website regularly. I'll be running survey/polls on there. I'm not going to say every week, but certainly every 2 weeks, guys and gals. So we want to hear your opinions. We reference them. By the way, the poll that I had out there prior to today asked the question, how likely is your department to face a major staffing issue in the next 5 years? 70% said that they would face or anticipate facing significant staffing issues in the next 5 years. So I don't think that this is particular to any single one of us. So thanks everybody for joining. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your family.